Once again, anti-Semitism has exploded on Columbia University's campus. Once again, Jewish students here in the United States are being harassed. Once again, echoes of Germany in the 1930s are reverberating in the halls of the Ivy League. What on earth is happening? Well, let me introduce you to a dear friend of mine, someone who I can't think of a better person to help us understand what's happening on college campuses than my friend Josh Ahrens. He's been the director of Christians United for Israel on campus. He's been the director of Israel Collective. His wife has been the director of CUFI on campus. So if someone knows what's happening on campus for Jewish students, those who speak up for the Jewish state, it is my friend Josh Ahrens. Josh, uh, first off, it's good to see you. But secondly, we are talking about something that's very sad, very tragic. Can you just help us understand what is happening at Columbia University?
I sure can. Thanks for having me on, Raj. What is happening is just the latest example, really, of the tolerance of anti-Semitism that has been going on for a long time on university campuses, particularly Columbia. And these students feel emboldened to go in and invade the spaces of other students to intimidate them, to scream and yell at them, and in this case, distribute flyers that say things like "Burn Zionism to the ground," "Crush Zionism," featuring imagery of broken stars of David, burning Israeli flags. These students had masks on. It was clearly a very disturbing and intimidating experience for those who were there to learn. But this has been going on for a long time, and Columbia says that they want to crack down on anti-Semitism, but it remains to be seen if they can actually put that into action.
And this happened on Tuesday, day one of the spring semester at Columbia University, and the class was called "The History of Modern Israel." And Josh, you and I have been, talking about Israel and talking about Zionism for well over a decade, both of us. And we've been to Holocaust memorials and Auschwitz, and what's just really hard to believe, and we've talked about this a lot, Josh, is how the posters are so similar to the posters of the 1930s in the Third Reich. And the fact that that's happening on American college campuses is just abhorrent. And so my question to you, Josh, as someone who knows this space really, really well, is this kind of thing only happening at Columbia University? Is this contained to Columbia, or is this a much bigger problem?
I wish it was, but it is a much bigger problem, and it's happening on campuses across the nation. And it's even happening on maybe even some Christian campuses. It's in all sorts of ways where you may not even see things that make the news. It's worked into different curricula and classes that are not even related to Israel. I've taken English classes where they worked in some anti-Israel propaganda. I've taken classes at Christian universities where they would work in that kind of a thing. And it was just always a shock to me to see it over and over again in the oddest of places. But I don't think you can really get a 4-year liberal arts degree without coming into contact with this kind of content. And it just seems like this is the status quo, when really it is a concerted effort to demonize Israel in every way possible.
I think your wife has to be one of the bravest people I've ever met. She was on the front lines of the battle for minds on campus for what, 6, 7 years. Um, I don't think people understand what it's like to stand up for Israel on a college campus. I think people think, oh, it's like saying you want lower taxes, or I'm pro this, or there is something, and this is CBN, so we can talk about biblical things and spiritual things. There is a demonic force, in my humble opinion. And a caveat that I hate that we have to make is that, yes, obviously Israel can be criticized. If you want someone to criticize Israel, just go to Israel. The Israelis love criticizing Israel, but there's something sinister about what's happening on college campuses. Can you kind of enlighten us? What is it like to stand up for Israel and the Jewish people on a college campus? When it really gets down to it, and you're tabling and you're speaking truth to power, what is it like?
Man, I don't think in my days on college campuses, I don't think I ever did anything more important because when you see it firsthand, it's not just like, oh, it's just some students who they don't know any better and they're just kind of, they want to protest something and this is it. It's unfortunately much deeper and much more disturbing than that. And when you come face to face with it and with that level of hatred and with the indoctrination that they experience that leads them to that, it's very disturbing because that, for example, a lot of students were celebrating when the October 7th massacre happened. And they said they wanted to see it come here to the USA. And even some professors were saying that. Even a Columbia professor was saying he thought that it was beautiful to see the terrorists coming over the border into Israel and terrifying and terrorizing Israelis. When you see it on campus, it's not just students protesting, it's face to face with what is, I agree, it is an evil demonic force that is underpinning this whole thing. And the students
Mhm.
may not understand that, but that is what's driving this hatred.
How do we push back? I think if you're in Columbus, Ohio, or Phoenix, and I don't know, Tulsa, and you see a lot of history repeating. If you're a student of the Holocaust, if you're a student of World War II, you're like, okay, that's wrong. We both had a mutual friend, a Holocaust survivor who passed away. His name was Irving Roth, and his thing was, this didn't start in a vacuum. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. One of the things he would always say is it always starts with words. It doesn't start with gas chambers. It doesn't start with crematorium. And it might sound like we're being hyperbolic, but that's how it starts. And Irving would always emphasize to you and me and everyone around, be like, hey guys, it starts with words. Then it transitions to boycotts, and I think we're there. Then it obviously transitions to violence. But what can I do? I'm just, I live in Cincinnati. I live in Atlanta. Maybe there's some fringe element in Columbia, but it's not going to bother me. It's not going to affect me. What would be your message to anyone watching this? What should the images of what happened at Columbia? What should that elicit in our heart, and how should we respond?
Mm. I would say you should respond as if it was just fill in the blank of a hate group and the group that they target. And if you saw them doing that to another group, how do you think people should react? And the reason the Holocaust happened is because not enough people recognized the evil and spoke up. So we must speak up. And you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be somebody that says, hey, I understand that is anti-Semitism and that is absolutely wrong. It's something that doesn't stay confined to a university campus. As we've seen, it makes its way into grade schools. Even I've seen grade school curricula with anti-Semitic content. It makes its
Mm.
way into the media, it makes its way into social media, and it destroys everything it touches, really from the inside out. And so we absolutely must speak up. Of course, it's the right thing to do for Israel, for the Jewish people, for the people that it targets, but also for our own country and our own communities, because it really does just destroy everything from the inside out. So you have to speak up, you have to stand strong, and you have to hold those who are in authority accountable. Because for some reason, from universities to news outlets, it's like, well, if you said that about any other group, you'd be fired on the spot or expelled on the spot. But for some reason, when it's Israel or the Jewish people, there's this like weird soft exception, and we have to say absolutely not. This is just, we must hold the leaders accountable to stand up and do the right thing.
Yeah, and lastly, Josh, I want to talk about what they're protesting, which is what's happening in Israel. And I find that a lot of the people, I used to live in New York, and there'd be these huge protests in Union Square on 14th Street, and I'd be like, "You ever been there, man?" And they're like, "No, but this happens." I'm like, and they're like, "Well, have you been there?" I'm like, and I hate to flex. I'm like, well, yeah, like 30 times. And they'd be like, oh man, this is not going to go well. And the thing is, what you realize, a lot of these folks have no idea what the heck they're talking about. They're just spitting out these words, genocide and apartheid. And we don't have time to get into the whole thing. We don't have time to get into the complexities of checkpoints and green lines. And there's a myriad of things across the spectrum that are valid arguments, valid discussions. And we can talk about that ad nauseum. And those are worthwhile conversations. But for here and now, the claims are that these people on the campus of Columbia, we should divest from Israel, we should boycott Israel, we shouldn't have any Israeli speakers, we should marginalize Israel because they are quote unquote committing genocide in the Holy Land. How would you respond to that, Josh?
I'd say I've been to Israel over 30 times as well, and I've spoken to Christian Israelis, Muslim Israelis, secular Israelis. You and I have gone to the West Bank together, Raj. We've talked to Palestinians, again, Christian Palestinians, secular Palestinians, Muslim Palestinians, who all say the same thing. Israel is not the problem. Israel wants peace. Israel is trying to make peace with their neighbors, and it's the terror organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, most of whom are funded and controlled by Iran, who are responsible for this. And they're not only terrorizing Israelis, but they're terrorizing the Palestinian people.
Mm.
And for some reason, nobody seems to be outraged about that because the whole agenda is to point at Israel, keep provoking Israel when Israel has to take a defensive action, as any country would who has experienced these kinds of attacks. Then all of a sudden they put it in the headlines and point at Israel and take things out of context. And I would say you have to just look at who's really causing the conflict, and
Mhm.
it's not Israel. You know, it's interesting too because the professor of the class that these students disrupted actually invited the protesters to come and sit down and have a
I saw
conversation.
that. I saw that.
And they wanted no part of it because
Yeah.
they won't have the facts to back it up. It's just all about propaganda and hatred, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think understanding that a lot of Palestinians are the victims in this situation, and I think you have to look at it soberly. Hamas, which is a genocidal jihadi group, and Israel, and I think what helps unpack it for folks is that people will hear arguments, people will hear lines, debates where people are like, I can't, I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough about this subject to debate you, but that doesn't sit right with my spirit. I don't know where, that point you just made. I don't know how to, really debate that. But I would say if you just understand that, yes, Israel is a human country full of normal people that make mistakes, but there is a holistically different approach when Israel, this biblical miracle, which is exactly what it is, says we value life, and Hamas openly, brazenly, proudly. This isn't, you don't have to just Google it. This is what they say out loud. We value death like you value life. The opening charter of the Hamas Declaration of Independence preamble, whatever you want to call it, originally said Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. And it's hard to understand that there are people getting caught in the middle of it, but you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can call evil evil and good good, and you just have to educate yourself. And that is exactly what you have helped us do, Josh. For those of you who are watching, if there aren't any Israelis watching, you have two Gentiles here who love and support you and let you know that you are not alone in it. And on our watch, we truly believe never again, and we will continue to speak out against this abhorrent anti-Semitism on America's college campuses. Josh Ahrens, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Raj. Good to see you.